Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad we're all here. Glad you're here. Thanks for worshiping with us. I just love that we get to worship together and be in the presence of God and come after a week of whatever it was and be able to come and lay that before the Lord and fellowship with people who are in the same space as we are. And God's welcomed us all in. So, yeah, glad to be here. We've spent a good chunk of time for the last couple of weeks together studying the book of Philemon. And we've been looking at this letter that Paul writes to this man, the slave owner, to talk about reconciliation, to talk about relationship, to talk about what it looks like to have this radical love, this prodigal son kind of love that we see in the story of the prodigal son, this forgiveness that is weighty, that's hard, that's difficult. And we've talked about how that can only truly come if we have experienced that from Jesus ourselves. If we've experienced his love, his forgiveness, then maybe we can replicate that in our lives to those around us. Now, in the past couple of weeks, after every message, and even on Friday nights, we've been going through the book of 1 John. It's talking about, hey, loving your brother and loving your sister. And if you don't, how can you say you love your brother or your sister or how can you say you love God who you can't see if you don't even love your brother or sister who you can see? And so we've been going through, really, I feel like God is kind of leading us in this direction to talk about what does it look like to love our brothers and sisters in Christ? What does it look like to be a reflection of that in our lives to those around us? But what I have loved is also the conversations that come after we do the Bible study or after we talk about our message. Last week we had like a huddle group of like 10 or 15 of us just talking, being like, that's really hard. Like, what about this? What if we keep getting hurt? What if we forgive and they're still doing the same thing over and over again? And so I think we actually need to keep talking about this for a couple more weeks. We're going to maybe shift a little bit away from the book of Philemon. We're going to look at some of the sayings of Jesus as it pertains to, as it relates to these kinds of relationships that we have with each other. So I think let me see if this, look, we've got the question up there already. So the question this morning is this. How do you, and I want you to turn to a neighbor and discuss this for about 60 seconds. Ask them, how do you destroy a relationship? All right, ready, set, go. Ask them that question. What do you think? How do you destroy a relationship? What do you think? Kick someone in the face? All right, I'm hearing a couple of things. I'm eavesdropping. I've heard tell people their secrets. I've heard kick them in the face. I've heard lots of great options here. We have lots of great options of what seems natural to destroying a relationship, whether that be a friendship, a relationship in your family, a relationship with a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever it is. How do you destroy a relationship? Now, I want to give you something that you might not expect. Maybe one way to destroy a relationship is by playing fair. That doesn't make any sense. Kika, go back to preschool. We learned that in the first grade. You got to play fair. You got to share. You got to do all that stuff. But what if playing fair might actually be a source of breaking down relationships? I want to go to something that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5. Well, this is something that he's quoting, actually. This isn't like an original saying of his. He's quoting something called Hammurabi's Code, which was the code, the law of the land. It's something that dates way before Jesus, and people use it as this as the way society should go. Like, this is what we should do in our society. And here's what he's quoting. He says this, you have heard, so this is what they've been saying for ages and ages. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. This is how they governed society. This is how we see it's fair, right? If you poke my eye out, I get to poke yours out. If you pull my tooth out, if you punch me in the face and my tooth falls out, I get to punch you in the face. It's just fair, right? That's how fairness works. If you come and burn my house down, I might not burn your house down, but you are going to go to court and you're going to have to pay me how much it costs to rebuild that house. That's fair. That's just fairness in society. That's how governments rule. It's just it keeps people in line, right? It keeps them fair. You don't want your house burnt down? Well, don't burn someone else's house down. It just doesn't make any sense. That's playing fair. And that's good for society, probably. It is good to keep us in line by saying that. But what does Jesus say? Notice how he says, you have heard it said, but what is Jesus going to say? How does he respond to this? He says, but I tell you. He's going to change the narrative. He's going to switch the story. He's going to almost flip it on its head. And what he's going to do is he's going to give us, I want you to notice, four different categories in which Jesus wants us to flip this on its head. And the first one is this. He says, if anyone wants to sue you, am I skipping something? Maybe not. Verse 40. Let's just go here. If someone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. So in the verse 40. There it is. I knew I was missing something. Okay, verse 39. Let's keep going there. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, you've heard this before, that turn the other cheek. Someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So what's he going to turn upside down here? He's turning the story of fairness upside down when it comes to violence. I want to turn this upside down. Now, I don't think he's promoting abusive relationships. I don't think that this is something that we need to say, oh, okay, well, I can remain in a relationship that is abusive, that's hurting me. When we are going to talk about that in the next couple of weeks about boundaries a little bit more. But we first want to look at this principle of playing fair. So he's saying, turn the other cheek. Maybe fairness is not the answer. The second one that I was staring at for about 5 minutes until I figured out we're missing something is this. He says, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. So here in the context of going to court with somebody, he's saying, okay, even in that context, playing fair might not be the answer. Let's flip that upside down. Third thing, saying if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Now, if you remember the story of Jesus when he's going to the cross, there's a moment where as Jesus is carrying the cross, it's too heavy for him, and he's just been beaten up. He's just like his body is in tons of pain, so he can't carry this cross up this hill. And so the Roman soldier sees this guy named Simon of Cyrene, and he looks at him and he says, hey, Simon, you carry this cross the rest of the way up. And actually, by Roman law at this point, if a Roman soldier asks you to carry something, by law, you are required to do it for up to 1 mile. But once the mile ends, once you get exactly to the mile, and they must have had Fitbits on or something to tell them, okay, you've hit the mile mark. Once you hit the mile mark, you can drop it, and you are no longer required to keep carrying it on. And so when Simon of Cyrene was asked to carry the cross, by law, he was required to do that. And this is where the principle of going the extra mile comes from. Jesus is saying, if they ask you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. In a relationship, playing fair might not be the answer. In fact, we might need to go the extra mile when it comes to relationships. In the fourth context, he says, give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. This is in the context of giving to the needy, giving to those around us who are in need. Do I just give them a little bit, or can I be a little bit more generous? Can I go the extra mile with them in this relationship? One of the stories that kind of pulls this out and makes this really clear for us is a story of the Good Samaritan. In Luke chapter 10, Jesus is talking about this story, and people are asking him, hey, what does it mean to be a good neighbor? What does it look like to be a good neighbor to the person next to me, to the person around me, the person in my class, the person in my school, the person who's my friend, whatever? how can I be a good neighbor to this person? And what we're going to see is he's going to show us three different almost categories of how you can be a neighbor, what a neighbor looks like. Not all of them are equal. Not all of them are the same level of goodness of being a neighbor. But he's going to give us these three levels of being a neighbor. So let's look at the first one. First one is, I heard this phrase in business class back in the day called WIFM. Anyone ever heard of WIFM? It stands for what's in it for me. WIFM. Like, I'm not going to do something unless there's something in it for me, unless I'm going to get something out of it. And in this story of the Good Samaritan, we see the man who's going down this road, and he gets beat up by these people, and he's left for dead on the street. And this priest and this Levite both separately come past him, and they see him lying there. And what do? They walk right by. Why? Because for them, they thought, I won't give if I don't get. In this situation with this guy, I'm busy, I've got stuff to do, like, I could help, but it's not going to benefit me in any way. It's not going to do anything for me. And so this actually is what? Is playing fair. This situation, isn't it fair? Like, if I'm not going to get anything, then I won't give anything. That's how it works. Let's look at another example. The second one is I give as much as I get. There's another character in the story who's the innkeeper. Now, we're going to skip a piece. If you know the story, we're going to kind of skip a little bit because there's the Good Samaritan. He picks up the guy who's been beaten up, and he brings him to this inn where he can be taken care of. And the innkeeper is the kind of guy who says, hey, this is my business. You're going to give me some money. I will provide for you a bed. You're going to give me some money, and I will take care of this guy for you. But you've given me $20. That's going to last you 3 nights. Once the 3 nights is over, once that $20 runs out, bye-bye. See you later. Why? Because that's playing fair. Because that's what it looks like in a relationship to say, we have a transactional relationship. You give to me this, I will give that back to you. You don't give to me this, I won't give that back to you. You treat me right, I'll treat you right. You mess with me, I mess with you. Right? I won't give if I don't get, or I give as much as I get. Is there a third option? Yes, there is. Glad you asked. Good question. We have a Good Samaritan. We have a third character who we want to look at, who we'll see I give regardless of what I get. This is not playing fair. Because playing fair is, I won't give if I don't get. Or playing fair is, I will only give as much as I get. Not playing fair might look like, I will give even if I don't get. No matter if I don't get anything back from it, I'll still give. Look at how this story goes. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. This is the man who was on the floor. He came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day, he was still there. And the next day, he took out 2 denarii, here's his money that he's going to give, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Which of these, now Jesus is asking, which of these do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? Was it the guy who played fair? Was it the guy who said, hey, I'm going to play fair? That's a good neighbor. The guy who said, I'm going to play fair in terms of I will only give what I get, or the guy who said, I'll play fair, I'm not going to give unless I get, or is it the third option, the guy who said, I will give regardless of whether I get anything or not? He said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to them, or to him, you go and do likewise. What is Jesus calling us to do this morning? Is he calling us in our relationships to play fair? Or is he saying, maybe we're called to go the extra mile? Maybe we're called to look at our relationships not as a transaction, not as an eye for eye or tooth for tooth, as the government says, as the laws of the world say, but we're called to go an extra mile in our relationships, to give regardless of whether or not we get. One of my favorite verses in the Bible comes from Romans 5:8. It said, "But God demonstrated his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, and there was a chance that we would never turn back to God, there's a chance that he would never get anything from us. He would never have a relationship with us. We would never go to him and say, Jesus, we want to be in relationship with you. We want to be as you created us to be. There's a chance that we would never turn back to him. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Did he play fair with us, like on our own? In our own weakness, in our own brokenness? Could we have potentially, if we were just me and Jesus, me and God, if it was playing fair, I would have had no way to make it into his presence, to be redeemed by him. Is he asking us to play fair? Is the Samaritan getting anything out of this? Not really. He's actually giving. He's putting the guy on his own donkey. He's paying out of his own pocket. He's saying, hey, if any excess you need afterwards, I will pay it out of my own pocket. If you want to destroy a relationship, maybe it's a strong statement. If you want to destroy a relationship, play fair. But if you want a relationship to flourish, if you want a relationship to look like how Jesus' relationship looks like with us, don't play fair. Go the extra mile. It's not you make a mistake. Like, if I'm in a relationship with you and I make a mistake, my hope is that you don't push me out. Be like, okay, you messed up, see you later. My hope is that you'll rise above that mistake and come to me and have a conversation with me and tell me, hey, this is what's going on. We need to work on this. I love you and I care for you, but we got to fix this because this is hurting me and this is hurting you and this is hurting others around you. So, should we play fair? I want to show you one other thing that Jesus says. And I want you to see if you can notice a difference between these two. So, look at these and turn to someone next to you again and ask them, spot the difference. What's the difference in these two phrases? Ready, say, go. Talkative bunch over there. What's the difference? What do you see? All right, so if we look at these two, the one on your left, don't do to others as you wouldn't have them do to you. And the one on the right is do to others as you would have them do to you. One of them, Jesus said, and one of them was actually a common saying that was around for years. Even other religions will talk about this principle. But Jesus turns the story a little bit upside down. The one that's common is don't do to others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. That's actually playing fair. Listen, I don't want you to hurt me, so I don't want you to steal my wallet, so I'm not going to steal your wallet. That's playing fair. If Jesus is saying do to others as you would have them do to you, there's a chance that if I give to you generously, I would love for you to do that to me back. I think that'd be great, but there's a chance that you won't. There's a chance that there won't be the sense of fairness of you doing the same thing back to me. But don't do to others. Is that the kind of relationship I want? Because what if I make a mistake? I'm human, right? And I make a mistake and I mess up and I hurt you. I'm in a relationship with Rachel. If you didn't know, we're married. Forgot to wear my wedding ring today, but we still are married. Right? We're married. If I make a mistake in that marriage, and we're doing the whole play it fair thing, if I hurt her, what's she gonna do? Hurt me. If I hurt you and we're playing it fair, your role is to hurt me back. And then what's that going to lead to? Well, you hurt me back. What am I going to do? Hurt you back. Oh, you hurt me back? What? I'm gonna hurt you back. And then it just keeps going. But if we want to live in a relationship that's not that, listen, this is why if you want a relationship to be fair, you're going to destroy your relationship. Because if that's how we're going, that's how it's going to end up, because we're all human. And if we're all human, one of us is going to make a mistake. And when I make a mistake, you're going to make that kind of mistake back to me. And I don't think that we should be playing fair. You're sarcastic, I'll be sarcastic back. You're angry, I'll be angry back. You're yelling, I'll yell back. Is that going to help us? Probably not. It's not going to help this relationship. Anyway, you withdraw, I'll give you the silent treatment. That's playing fair. That's how playing fair works. Have you ever heard after church one day, you see a bunch of kids running around, and then all of a sudden someone starts yelling, and we go over there and we're like, what's wrong? What? Why are you hitting each other? And then someone says, what? Well, he started it. Right? We've all heard that before. We've probably all said it at one point in our lives. He started it. Okay. And what does that kid think? He thinks, well, if we're playing fair, if he punches me in the face, I'm going to punch him back in the face. And then that kid who says he started it thinks that I am innocent. I am free of all guilt and all brokenness because he started it. Because that person is the one who started it. So as the person who was hurt first, it's okay for me to give it back to them because he started it. Because she started it. That is playing it fair. I don't know why, but in our heads, that's what makes sense. But is that what Jesus is calling us to do? Listen, good and fair people get divorced every day. Well, you did this to me. Well, you hurt me like this. I'm a good person. I'm a fair person. So it's only fair that I either do it back to you or see you later. We were talking about this on Friday night. It's a great conversation. It's only fair that if you hurt me in this way, I hurt you back. John Maxwell said this. This is a big leadership guy talking about the extra mile. He says, go the extra mile because traffic there is light. Go the extra mile because traffic there is light. If I go the extra mile, the tension will not be as high. If I'm saying, hey, can I give a little bit more? Can I be a little bit more forgiving, a little bit more loving, even though I know that there's a chance that I might not get it back? In the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus is trying to teach us this principle of what it means to love like he loves, to give like he gives, to forgive like he forgives, and it's not by playing fair. So how do I go beyond playing fair? This will be our last little passage, but I'm still going to talk about it for like another couple minutes. So let's look at this passage. Luke chapter 6. How do I go beyond playing fair? Here's what Jesus says. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Okay, you love someone who loves you. Cool. Even sinners love those who love them. Even the guy who robbed the bank loves the other guy who robbed the bank with him. Even the guy who murdered those people down the streets, he loves the guy who murdered with him. What credit is that to you? If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those who from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Do good to them and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. Jesus is flipping the story upside down, saying playing it fair might not be the answer. In fact, I think that is what he's saying. So practically, Jesus, how do I do this? I could give you a huge list of things, but I'm going to give you four things. Four things that we could do to play it fair, or to not play it fair, to practically do what Jesus is calling us to do. Here's the first one. Give the opposite. Give the opposite. When Rachel and I were doing premarital counseling, it was actually pre-engagement at this point, and we're still working on this because it's hard to do this. But our pre-engagement counselors, when we were having conversation with them, they said, hey, if you're angry with each other, if you're really frustrated, they said this. They said, do the opposite of what you want to do. So if you want to yell at them, don't yell at them. If you want to walk away from the conversation and not just ignore it, go and talk to them. The last thing that you want to do in the middle of a fight is sit down, hold their hand, and tell them that you love them. That's what they told us to do. Said, sit down together, hold each other's hand in the middle of a difficult conversation, hold each other's hand and tell them that you love them. This is a difficult conversation, but we want to work through this. And man, this works wonders. I mean, talk about anything that's hot and escalated, and you do that, it brings it right down. Do the opposite. Give the opposite of what you would hope. Sometimes we sabotage the possibility of getting what we want by giving exactly the opposite. So if I want, I'm reading this book by Henry Cloud. A lot of this content is coming from this psychologist named Henry Cloud. Good Christian guy. He really digs into this. He's talking about this story of a woman who is in a relationship with a husband who's not pulling his weight, who's not doing a great job in this marriage. And she asks this doctor. He says, "Doctor, how much is too much? Like, how far is too far? When can I?" And he's asking her. So you're asking, when can I get a divorce? And she says, yes. And so they start having a conversation, and in that conversation, basically what it comes down to is that he made a mistake. Once again, he made a mistake. And before he made a mistake, they were going to counseling. For 3 months, they were in a great spot in their relationship. Oh, okay, great. After 3 months, we're in a good place. We're having good conversation. We're living together happily. But then he made a mistake again after 3 months of it being great. And so when he made the mistake, she got upset. And she pulled away, and she's like, I'm throwing in the towel. But she did what he was doing. He made a mistake. So she made the mistake of saying, well, you're never going to get better. You're no good. You're so on and so forth. So she ended up doing exactly what he was doing. She was playing it fair. Hey, if you're going to be good, I'm going to be good. That's what she was saying. If you're going to do well, I'm going to do well. But he didn't do well. And so she decided, I'm not going to do well. I'm going to throw in the towel. In our relationships with our friends, with our family members, are we expecting, only if you are good to me, only if you love me well, then I will love you well? Or are we thinking, maybe I'll go the extra mile? So the first thing that we can try to do is to give the opposite. Second thing that we can try to do is get rid of anger. Now, I've said this before, anger is not a sin. Anger is not an issue if it is handled correctly. We all get angry. In fact, Jesus got angry multiple times. In the Bible, we see Jesus getting angry because there's something wrong in society and culture and people and relationships, and he wants something to change in that environment. So anger in itself is not a problem. But when we, for example, don't allow ourselves to feel the anger, to ignore the anger, to say, I'm going to brush it under the rug, and we don't have conversations with the person that we're angry with or with the situation that we're angry about. We just keep brushing it under the rug. Things are either going to get worse, we're going to become passive aggressive, we're maybe just going to become like this lifeless soul. Like we walk around and because we're suppressing all these emotions, we're unable to live life fully. Because God actually gave us emotions. And so if we're suppressing them, we're not living the way He intended us to live. So that's one thing that maybe sometimes we do. Another way is in our anger to get back at the other person, to lash out, to hurt them, to shame them, to manipulate them. We use our anger for wrong, for sin. And sometimes, this is something that I've experienced. Sometimes I get angry when I see my friends turning away from God. I think this might actually be good anger. I'm not angry at them. I'm angry at the fact that this is what's happening because I love them. And because I've seen in some of my friends, when they're turning away from God, they end up making decisions that are hurting them and hurting other people around them. And I'm saying, oh man, like I hate that this is what's happening. I hate that you are turning away from God. And then what I've seen is that because I'm angry at what's happening, my anger gets directed towards them. And then I start to get angry at them. And then I start to be short with them. And then I start to make fun of them. And then I start to talk about them negatively. Oh, I can't believe what this person's doing. And in that anger, even though maybe it's righteous anger to begin with, it turns into an anger that hurts the other person. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help them to grow. It doesn't help them to see their sin that's leading them further and further from God. And what that ends up doing is that actually ends up pushing that person farther away from God. So it's okay to be angry that my friend, my dear friend, is walking away from the Lord. Yeah, it is okay. But how am I going to respond to that? Is that anger going to hurt them more? Or can I use that anger to funnel that into a productive conversation, a productive hangout time? How are we going to use the anger? Third thing that we're going to do is ask yourself, what is helpful? A mature person might ask questions like, how can I turn this around? How can I help? What does this person need? What could get him or her to a better place? If we notice, one of the pushbacks that I've been getting the last couple of weeks is, hey, what if this person is in a habit, in repeating habits of constantly doing wrong, of constantly hurting me, of constantly hurting those around me? Like I said, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next couple of weeks because, yeah, I don't want you to be like this rug that's just getting walked all over. I don't think that that's the extent of how it should be. There are these things called boundaries. But how can I ask good questions? Ask, how can I help this person? Maybe approaching them and saying, hey, I'm seeing this. This is hurting me in our relationship, and I care about you. But if this doesn't get better, and you can see that it's not getting better, how can I help? What can we do together? Is there something that I can be a resource for you, a friend, someone to talk to try to walk out of this difficult situation? And the last thing that we'll want to do is realizing that we're humans, and sometimes these things take a supernatural God to intercede. And so a lot of times, maybe we'll forget to approach God in prayer. To come before Him, bring our friend, bring our spouse, bring our whoever it is that we're in a relationship with, our kids, our parents, our siblings, to bring those situations, those relationships before the Lord and say, God, would you do something in this situation? Would you do something in me? Maybe I'm not seeing something that I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'm only wanting to blame the other person rather than seeing that there's something that you want to change in me, or you want to build something in me, perseverance, trust, unconditional love. Would you help me to see what's going on here? So as the worship team comes back up so we can close, I just want to read us this last passage from Romans 12. And then we're going to sing one more song to close this out. It comes from Romans, maybe I don't have it, Romans 12, 17, 18, and verse 21. Paul is teaching, and he says this: "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live in peace with everyone." And then he closes it with this. He says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Let's pray.